On Backyard Farmer, all season you'll hear us talk about kind of common garden fruits that you'll have in your landscape, things like raspberries and grapes, boysenberries, blackberries, you name it. Those are very common things. A lot of us have tried even things that are kind of hard to grow in our landscape, something like a blueberry, which can be a challenge for a lot of us here in Nebraska. What I want to discuss today and look at are things that are native to our region, that are something that may be a little unusual for you. You may have a hard time finding it. It may be something that through a friend, a neighbor, even maybe a contact at the nursery, you could pick up some of this plant material, but it's something you might find enjoyable. All of these plants are very hardy, especially for the eastern part of the state. And throughout the state, if you have a location that is, kind of in a low-lying area, something that has a little bit better soil conditions, that these plants would probably do pretty well there. First one we're going to look at is the persimmon. This is a very common plant. It's native to the southeast part of the state, but there are some improved cultivars that have larger fruit. Now, one thing about this, and I have a couple growing in my own yard, for me, the easiest way to get this plant is to get yourself a neighbor or friend or someplace where you can collect some nice sized fruit. Take that seed and grow it in your garden. I've planted the seeds, just sowed them directly into the soil. They're doing quite well, and my plants are just loaded with fruit this year. The unusual part about this plant is that the fruit has to be very, very mature before you can pick it. Otherwise, it's not really edible, to be honest with you. So it's something you're going to wait for the fruit to get really soft. It becomes orange. You can pull it off then, and then it's really about as sweet a fruit as you can find. And it's good in things like puddings and cakes, and you may have a grandparent that may have baked something with persimmon at some point. So this is a plant that's kind of fun to try, especially if you have kids. It'd be a fun plant to have in the garden. This tree here is the pawpaw, another native to eastern Nebraska, southeast corner of the state. It does well in the shade, as you can see here, but also does very well in a sunny location in full sun. In fact, in full sun, it has a much more neater habit, more pyramidal, and makes a lovely small tree. The nice thing about it too is it produces a fruit that you can eat out of hand, so once it becomes ripe, it'll become yellow, kind of like a banana. And it has kind of a custardy banana flavor. But it's something you can either eat out of hand or use again in baked goods like banana bread or something like that. This plant we're going to look at here is Cornelian cherry dogwood. So it's a shrub. It can become quite large over time, but it's relatively slow growing. Has lovely glossy green foliage. Nice thing about it is it is one of the earliest blooming plants in the landscape, and the flower buds are very, very hardy here. So it has a nice yellow flower in the early spring, earlier than forsythia. And then it sets a nice cherry-like fruit, kind of a sour cherry fruit that is used historically in jams and jellies and syrups and that sort of thing. Usually they find it in Eastern Europe, but it's something that's becoming popular here in Nebraska, and one I've made jam out of, and it was very good. What we're looking at here is a Dolgo Crabapple. It's a great tree. It flowers lovely each year, really has no disease or insect problems. We really have very few problems with it. It's an area here that doesn't get a lot of additional resources, so it's kind of on its own, but you can see most years we just get a bumper crop of fruit out of it. It's a bit tart, but you can eat it out of hand, and again, you can make jelly out of it certainly, and use it in other things. My grandmother used to pickle crab apples, so for those of you who remember that, you can always do that. So a crabapple is something you might want to consider as well. Other things to think about you could add to your landscape would be hazelnuts, which are a fun plant to have. You have to fight the squirrels for them, but they're fun to have, and they make a lovely landscape plant as well. You can look at even some of the apricots. I have an ornamental one at home that I like a lot. Serviceberries certainly are a plant that has a lot of potential uses, as well as the fruit is edible and used in pies, and again, you can just eat that out of hand. So there's a lot of things you can add that are edible plants. They flower nice, they have good fall color, and they're fun to have in the landscape as well.